Coming up next on stage is, we've been talking about the intersectionality of these generations, particularly in women. The political space, as we've just heard, it can be quite unkind, not just to women, but particularly young women. And if there's somebody who knows a thing or two about that, it is the Deputy Minister of Information, Communication and Technology of Namibia. This is Honorable, Your Excellency, Emma Inamutsila Theophilus. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Edith. I thought we agreed after Madam Pomzila spoke that the words honorable and excellency do not apply. But thank you so much, Edith. Very good afternoon, everybody. Very happy to be here. Of course, this is our second Nala anniversary. Just seeing how everything has moved so quickly with Aya and my fellow council members, and to have all of you here with us. It's wonderful because the time is now to collectively work towards a young feminist movement on the continent that is a disruptor and that is going to shake tables. And no other place is better than the Nalafem collective, and all of you being our partners, our sisters in ensuring that that happens. So this afternoon I'll be moderating a very, very, very robust session around building trust. All over the world, we saw, especially post-pandemic, that we see that people are losing trust in governments, they're losing trust in their leadership, they're losing trust in their community's ability to sustain themselves. And to help me steer this conversation around the rise of young women in politics, I'd like to invite the following panelists. First, I'd like to invite, thank you very much. First, I'd like to invite Rana, who is a 2022 Congresswoman, New York Congresswoman Rana, and who will be able to give us some insights from running for office herself. Second, I'd like to invite Aisha, who's also a council member from Nigeria. She is the founder of Citizens Hub, to also give us her insights around young women rising on the continent in politics. And last but not least, I'd like to invite Wanja Maina, who is the national chairperson of the Kenya Disability Rights, People with Disabilities activists in Kenya. There you go. Welcome, welcome. Thank you. We all have mics now. So, I was thinking about some of the questions I would like to ask you, but I think there's only one common one. One core question around young women in politics on the continent. Perhaps I can start with you, Aisha. Globally, as we speak right now, the amount of young people in parliaments is less than 2%. Young people under the age of 30. And even less for any young women in parliaments or positions of decision-making, where policies and laws are made about what we eat, the quality of our education, the quality of our health, the safety of women and girls on the continent. So my question to you, Aisha, and to all of you as you give your lived experience and your own insights on the rise of young women in politics on the continent is, what is the status quo? Why do we have so many women either not having the opportunity to run for office or getting into office and moving out so quickly because of the system? And what can we do about it from the context that you live in ensuring that young women, especially considering that 60% of this continent population is under the age of 30, actually get spaces at the decision-making tables where their lives and livelihoods are decided on?
Thank you very much, Emma. Good evening, everyone. I think I will start with a quote from Dr. Obi Ezekwesili, where she said that leadership is gender neutral. And one of the things that we have to understand is that as women, as girls, we've been conditioned to believe that we are not supposed to be leaders. So that's a major thing that we have. And when it comes to leadership, sort of like women, female, we assume that we're supposed to serve just selflessly and not get anything, because that's the way we're all brought up. So that's why you're having more and more people gravitating towards, activism, civil society, making that difference without any expectation, and when it comes to time that decisions are supposed to be made, then you find women are moving up. So the first thing is that conditioning, like I said earlier, that we have. And then we have society telling women what they're supposed to do. And so if you find, they will tell you that, oh, as a woman, the moment you want to run for office, it's not that they won't say that you're not competent or something. They'll say you're a prostitute. Simple as ABCD. They will call you all sorts of names. Why are you there? And then sometimes because we are brought up to be nice and not just ruffle the table, okay, so let's let it be. Enough of all of that. If we are really honest with ourselves in the continent of Africa, we should ban men from politics for 50 years. Because they spot the whole space. But here we are. For example, if you have one person who is a female who has done something wrong, they will say to you, oh, women, you know, they've given you chance. One person have done this thing. She has been corrupt. So and so person has been corrupt. And you're thinking, what about the thousands of men that have been corrupt? Has that stopped any man from being in office? It hasn't. So one of the things that we must be deliberate about is to understand that there's nothing dirty about politics. Politics and advocacy, they are the same thing. They are all about the greater good. The problem that we have is that the people who have been in politics, they have not had the competence, people who are corrupt, people who are not supposed to be in leadership role, have been the ones who are defining for us what politics is. And that has to stop. If we have an understanding that, look, politics, activism, advocacy, it's all the same thing. We're fighting for the greater good. Why then wouldn't we have young women, competent young women in politics? Because if you look at it, advocacy, what's the percentage of young women who are doing advocacy, who are working for the greater good? But we have, like I said earlier, that conditioning, which is so powerful, where you're told that politics is dirty, you shouldn't be part of it, you should just leave it there, and just be there and doing the nice thing and just be doing good things. That wouldn't, that has to stop. Another thing also is on the issue of financial freedom. It's very important. At the end of the day, and I like the statement that money is sexist, money is racist. If we are not getting to a place where women understand that the first thing that you have to do is to get your financial independence. In that way, you have a voice. In that way, you're able to make that difference. And that way, you're able to play in the role that you can play, even when it comes to politics. And so nobody is going to tell you that don't do this. What we have today in Nigeria, most specifically, is that people who have looted our nation dry are the ones who continue to perpetuate themselves in office or perpetuate their stooges that will do what they want to do. And most times you have these young women that we are talking about, that they are competent, they're not going to do the wrong thing, and so because they know they cannot be controlled, then it's not easy to put them in there. We must get to a place where we are having a critical mass. We no longer have the luxury not to participate in politics. A critical mass, we must move them from advocacy into politics. It's now no longer about whether you want to play politics, it's that you have to do politics. How many of us are we going to put there? So that when you have that critical mass, they're able to get to that decision, the table where decisions are being made, and they will be able to make that decision. So we have to come to a place where we know that it's no longer business as usual. It's now business unusual, and some of us must deliberately move from advocacy into politics. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aisha. And you speak of something very important, that representation matters, that it's really not a choice, and that maybe we should ban men for 50 years, so we rectify the mess that they've created. Coming to you, Rana, you ran for Congress in New York, in the United States. I want you to walk us through that process, because as we talk about building trust and the journey of a young woman running for office, I'm sure you have some serious stories to tell about just that lived experience alone of 2 years running for office and it sort of blowing up in your face based on people being afraid of your potential and what you could bring to the table. So can you talk to us a little bit about your lived experience in that instance and what you were able to face in that time of running for office, but also the importance of building trust in the community that you represent, the constituents that you advocate for, and how that critical mass of people supporting you is necessary, especially for young women who might not have the resources, might have so much misogyny, ageism that they're facing, and how that, community could be a saving grace in that time of need.
For sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Rana Abdul Hamid. And I always start talking about my story by start talking about where I'm from. I was born and raised in Queens, New York. Some of you may know what that is, some of you may not. And I grew up in a North African working class community. So it's literally as if you took little Egypt and you brought it into Queens. That is my neighborhood, the signs, the language, the way people interacted with each other. That's kind of how Queens is made up. And I came to organizing and I came to activism really at the intersections of being a young Muslim working class person growing up in Queens in a post 9/11 environment where I saw my community experience both state-sanctioned violence, but also a lot of economic insecurity and housing insecurity. And so I was 14 years old and had a Malcolm X book under my arm, rallying through the streets to make sure our schools weren't shut down, to make sure that our communities were safe. And I had that mistrust in politics. I think like growing up, I always saw politics as this dirty, evil thing that you could never create change from within, right? And I remember as a young person, especially over the last couple of years in the US and across the globe, seeing these changes, right, nationally, where we're finally seeing the kinds of leadership, like the leadership we heard from earlier, that actually reflected my values for the very first time. And it was really in the context of the pandemic as a young person where I saw my community as a working class immigrant community, as a North African community, in the wealthiest city in the world. People don't think of this when they think of New York. We have a $104 billion yearly budget. My neighbors, my family, we didn't have access to hospitals. There was food insecurity, the reality of the racism, the policing, the lack of housing. People were saying shelter in place. When we're living 3 generations in 1-bedroom apartments, you can't really shelter, right? You can't isolate in a pandemic. And it was these issues, and then also watching my representative who had been in office for 3 decades, longer than I had been alive, so talk about not passing on the baton, stay in office, that inspired me to think of wanting to run for office. And it's actually, I wish I had that courage to wake up one day and be like, that's it, I'm gonna do it. Because I think it takes the type of person to do that. I always say, like, it takes the kind of person to want your face on posters. Like, it takes the kind of person to want to see yourself speak everywhere. But it was really because of the organizing and because of a coalition of over 30 organizations in New York City that prompted me and brought together this race. And so absolutely, when I walked into rooms, we challenged the status quo. Nobody expected the kind of race that we would run. Nobody thought that a 27-year-old girl from Queens can raise $1 million, that a 27-year-old girl from Queens can build a coalition with some of the most powerful electeds from across New York City and the country, right, and mobilize literally tens of thousands of people to run an effective race. And ultimately, we experienced this horrible situation, which is gerrymandering. So for people who know, America is racist. And our politics are racist. And so the maps were redrawn, and I actually was cut out of the district I was running in. And I was either to move from the neighborhood, which I'm committed to my African immigrant community that I want to run and represent in, and run to a neighborhood that had nothing to do with me or my community, or I run against someone who I was in coalition with, and that's the choice that they gave me. And so ultimately the race was not a success, but I'll leave it at a high note in that the work was never over, right? And as I started an organizer and I continue to organize, and I deeply believe that women should be in politics because when I was on the inside, I saw how dirty it was when people were at the table who were not vested in community, who did not have community interests in mind, who only cared about the dollars, right? Who only care about real estate lobby and all these other things, and who are, quite frankly, a lot of whom are racist and sexist and doing harm on our community. And so it's absolutely necessary for the people who are like, I don't think I should be in politics. If you don't think you should be in politics, you should be in politics because you don't have the ego of the person who thinks they should be in politics. And so that is my philosophy. we keep asking women to run for office. Women do not run unless they're asked 12 times, on minimum, on average. You have to ask a woman 12 times to run for office before she runs for office. So I'm asking you to run for office, I'm asking you to run for office, I'm asking you to run for office, because every single one of us deserves to be in those spaces of power, in those rooms that decide what happens to our bodies and our communities.
Absolutely,
Emma,
Rana.
can I quickly add something?
Yes, you
What
can.
she has said.
Yes.
You know, you said your race is not a success. No, that's wrong. It is a success.
Thank you.
You ran.
I take
you
it.
raised.
All
And I'll
right.
tell you something. I had a president who spent 12 years consistently every 4 years running for office to get into office and give us disastrous leadership. So you've just started. This is just the beginning.
It's just
so
the
it's
beginning.
a success and you keep going.
Hell yes.
100%. So if not us, then who? If not now, then when? Thank you so much for sharing your experience, Rana. Wanja, you are a politician and the national chairperson of the People with Disabilities League and in the Jubilee Party. Tell us about your experience, because whether it's women, whether it's marginalized communities, whether it's people with disability, whether it's, young women, these are all groups that don't fit the narrative of male, white, the dominant characteristics of people who are in power. What has been your experience in having young women run for office, and what can you share in terms of the realities we need to be aware of women with disabilities running for office in a time such as this, where all of us are really being pushed and elbowed out of positions of leadership and power?
Okay, right. Good evening, everyone. I don't know if it's evening or afternoon, but at least I know it's after lunch. My name is Wanja Maina. As you have rightly put it, I'm the national chairperson of the People with Disabilities League at Jubilee Party. As at now, Jubilee Party is the third largest party in Kenya, and since 2013 to 2022, it was the ruling party. I think I'll sort of put my insights in a mixed way, because when I was invited, I looked at the word intersectionality. You know, in Kenya, Article 100 talks about marginalized people as people who are young, women, and people with disabilities, and then marginalized community and tribes. So now I was asking myself, where do I really fall? Because if it's by age, I am young. If it's by being a woman, I am a woman. If it's having a disability, I have a disability. So after seeing how marginalized I am, when I look at Article 100, I asked myself, is it a strength or is it a weakness? When we started the discussion, we talked about the amount of young people in worldwide in parliament is 2%. And as a good student of African studies and anthropology, I just remembered about our culture, our proverbs, like where I come from. I don't know if there's anyone who comes from where I come from, but where I come from, one of the proverbs says that when a young person is on top of a tree, they see, when an old person is down a tree seated, they see far than when a young person on top of a tree. If we loosely translate it, it is as if we come from traditional African society that puts premium, wisdom, leadership, ability to make sound decisions on age. Therefore, it is not surprising that when a young person who is a woman intends to vie for a political seat, they are first asked questions like, are you married? If you have a surname, like in Kenya, most women, maybe if they have a dad, let's say the surname is a male surname. So if you go to the electorates down there, then it's the surname, they're curious to know, is that your dad's name or your husband's name? And that answer in itself is a loaded answer, more than 2 term papers or 2 theses on women's empowerment and challenges they face in politics. When they try to figure if it's your dad's name or your husband's name, they'll ask, like, generally to be a proper, nice woman in the politics on the ground is what Kenyans say. It's like when you are filled the skirt, like you're fat nicely, now you are a proper woman, I quote unquote. They ask, so your mama who to mean, whose mom are you? So now they have decided, oh, your surname is your dad's and you don't have a child. So how then are we going to elect you in a position like the senatorial position, for example? And we can also go on and on to look at now what that does to even women who can't give birth because of biology and even out of choice. We can as well just look at women who were not married or not and what that does to them. But really speaking out of my own experiences, they have been unique because in 2021, I decided to vie for a seat. So I told myself, I want to vie for a seat. And then I told myself, I want to vie for a big seat because just I encouraged myself. So I said that I'm going to vie for a seat of Member of Parliament in where I grew up. I grew up in a constituency not too far from here. It's called Mathare. When I said I want to vie and I submitted my papers to my political parties, at around that time, that's when I was elected into the leadership position, it was the usual, it's now called negotiated democracy. Sit in a table like the way we are seated, and then we start judging. So now you, okay, okay, you still have some time. You just wait kidogo. There are those affirmative action seats, they are called nominated. Those are the seats that are given to fill up the basket, or if your party does well. Oh, needless to say, I was negotiated out with the hope that I would get nominated. Now the seat that you are elected by your party, but not by the constituents. And I think that is a story of many women, really, whereby if you look at Kenya in our local context, there are 47 women representative positions. Now, in the 40, those are women's seats. So I've seen cases where women who aspire to vie for governor, senator, the seats that you are competing with women and men, you are relegated back to your place. And what is your place? To vie as a woman representative to compete amongst women. And that is also reflected in the number of women who have been elected in single constituency seats and in the seats that are not traditionally reserved for women. So what challenges did I get? Maybe if I, just for a quick second. I think when I was elected now into the leadership seat of the party, it was just the awkwardness, the in-betweenness. You don't have the warmth of being together with the other young people because they say, you and your disabled people, you are their leader. Certainly there is also unique patriarchy even amongst disabled people because the men think they are better than the women and that kind. It doesn't help much when you're younger. And then mine was also unique. In Kenya, sometimes we don't confront some of these things, but tribe is also an issue. So I remember when we were filling the leadership positions in the party, young people, and it's also some realities, like if you look at a political party, you can tell that most parties are, the organizing principle is around tribes. So you can tell, like in my party, they were saying, in that party, there's no representative of young Kikuyus. Kikuyu is my tribe. So why? Because in their eyes, I am a representative of disabled people, but they don't see me as one of them in terms of tribe. And I want to consider myself as Kikuyu as they come. So it also happens also now even in terms of women. No, we don't have representation of women. Because in terms of how we are conditioned, in terms of how we are socialized to believe, and it has been emphasized and reinforced by even development aid programs, media. People with disabilities, disabled people, the semantics, they're often seen from the prism of charity work. These people are weak. You can tell even in terms of the kind of advertisements that are done on TV. I think earlier we had talked about COVID organizing and what have you. And I remember I was implementing one of the COVID projects. And I told one of the people who are funding us, don't tell me to go and give these people to give them basics, consumables. I would like you to employ them even if it's a short term so that they can implement the public health education. Because you see, even in terms of empowerment, in terms of attitudes towards society, it's more or less from a charitable model, let's help them. So it's sort of hard now to disassociate that to a person who is seen as fragile and weak. aspiring to take up public leadership, holding resources, managing human resources, for example. So that is where I'd like to start it from.
Thank you so much. So I have a follow-up, because as you're speaking, I'm reflecting on my own experience. How you negotiate reclaiming back your agency and your power in the space, and building the trust in your own community. For example, when I was appointed deputy minister, it was at the height of the pandemic. It was in March 2020. And the first question was, where is she coming from? Although I've been in the space for years. Then the second is, she's barely out of diapers. How is she going to handle the office? The shoes are too big for her to fill. So how did you navigate reclaiming the space in your agency to say that regardless of whether you negotiated out of running for office from a party level, which is a different conversation even, because internally in the party and even making it on the ballot is a big challenge in itself. How did you reclaim back your agency to say, but I am here, I am present, I have the capabilities, this is some of my track record in showing that I'm able to hold this office, so that your community, one, trusts that you're able to take up the mantle, but that even when the opportunity presents itself again, you're willing to go and stay the course?
Thank you very much for that question. I thank God because I remember when Janet was speaking in the morning, she said that sometimes she's speaking from a point of privilege, which is something good to acknowledge, because I also know that my experiences are quite unique in the sense that if you look at sub-Saharan Africa, only 1% of disabled women are literate. Considering that I am literate, I consider myself to be part of the 1% that is able to stand for self and ideally for others. One of my university lecturers at University of Nairobi, I remember one day we were talking with him, and we were just talking about politics, and I remember we were asking, should we have affirmative action? What is the point? Everybody who wants to vie, just go and vie like everybody else. And that is because it takes a special kind of an eye to sort of say that affirmative action is important. So once I got into the political party office, what we did is at first I started, if the women who are vying in our political party, they were paying 50% of the nomination fees. So like the governors were paying 500,000, the women were paying 250. So you sort of say that now that I'm here, I just have to show that I'm looking at things from that level, so you start pushing for change from within in a way. So one of my lecturers really emboldened me in one of the conversations when we were talking. I remember I was telling him, I feel so bad because sometimes I feel like I'm just a token. You just come, we have to have women. We have to have youth. Where are the young people? It doesn't help that sometimes when you go for the meetings, your role is just like to pray for the meeting. Okay, it doesn't mean that praying is bad, but you get me, like. And sometimes even when you go for other meetings, like I'm in a school board, you find that even a woman who is a board member, she has suddenly given herself a role of serving tea. It's not bad in praying. And sometimes we say, your role is to show people the geography of the room, the washroom are on the left, the studio are on the left. But you wonder, but you are there as a director, and there is someone else who can do that. And it doesn't mean serving tea is a bad thing, but I know you get me. So my lecturer told me, he gave me an analogy. He told me that, in Kenya, like one of the delicacies for the ceremony is chicken. So if you have gone to your village and you've been given a chicken, and when you put it in the boot of your car, you hold it like this in the hands. So by the time you come to Nairobi from my village, which is like 2 hours away, when you remove you had held it like this so that it doesn't move in the cupboard. So when you get to your home and you remove the rope that you had tied it in the legs, it won't move. Because it had been tied for like 2 hours or 3 hours or even 5 hours, depending on where you come from. So you have to kick it a bit, to kick it nicely so that it starts moving, because it had started in one position for a very long time. So I think for me, my lecturer helped me to understand the need for affirmative action. And that analogy for me was profound because it says, if it's a woman, we are coming from a traditional African society that socialized women's place to be, I quote unquote, in the kitchen. That women's role in leadership is only appreciated in the private life, organizing the visitors, decorating the room, but it's the same, maybe at communal level it's appreciated when you are visiting the sick, doing those community things, but when it comes to public life, taking up leadership, it will require for us to kick the chicken a bit so that now it can sort of start moving. And that's why I really loved it when the former Minister of Education from Nigeria talked about the issue, because she talked about fear. And sometimes even as we look at the external factors that really affect our leadership, sometimes we might as well want to look within about the self-limiting beliefs. You're scared, people will talk about you, people will talk about your hair, people will talk about your clothes, or your husband. So there is also the inward self-limiting beliefs and the outward. So how did I overcome? Probably it's work in progress. Janet said that change and progress is fragile, but I'm happy because I'm getting, out of it. But when women say you have to work twice as hard to get half the credit. Now, if you have so many intersectionalities like me, probably I'll say you work thrice as hard to get a third of the credit, but it's work in progress.
It is work in progress. Thank you so much for sharing. And you did say something profound, and it's something I've also, always thought about. When you check International Women's Day or National Women's Day, all the messages, women are the cornerstones of our society, in our communities, in our homes. They bring life. Only their bodies can ensure that life is made, Legacies are continued because of women. If women have the ability to raise future presidents and are able to be the cornerstones of societies and homes, surely they can be leaders of countries and nations. But coming back to the both of you, Aisha and Rana, before I give an opportunity for 2 or 3 questions, and time is limited, the journey of a young woman rising, one, being politically conscious, rising into politics, getting into politics, and actually staying in politics is characterized by a lot of challenges. I want us to talk a little bit about violence. Because whether it's a woman in politics, whether it's a CEO of a bank, whether it's a rural woman, it's a domestic worker, whether it's a young woman who's a student, there's a common thread around violence. Violence doesn't discriminate us based on our status as women. It finds us wherever we are. In a time where we are encouraging more and more women to run for office, we see with the advent of online spaces and platforms, at the peak of the pandemic specifically, violence against women politicians. You have women being threatened that, they're going to be raped or going to be killed just to silence their activism in politics. How would you reflect on that? And what could women do with these fears in mind that I might, experience violence, my family might distance themselves away from me because of the political stance I'm taking, and the way I'm conducting myself to ensure that I'm able to represent my communities? How can we overcome some of those challenges, especially for young women who are aspiring for public office?
Okay, so before I answer your question, just to pick it up from some of the things that she said. I remember in 2020, during the NSAS protest, there were a lot of people who said to the Nigerian youth that what a young person can see standing on a mountain, that an elder person will see it sitting down. And the Nigerian youth gave a fabulous answer. They said they will use drone to see those things. So while you are standing on the mountain, they will use drone. It's about smart work rather than hard work. And the next thing also is what you talked about. And this is something that normally happens. In gathering, they will, can you please pass me that whatever tea? Or guys, stand up and go and carry your tea. I didn't come here to pass tea. We need to be very specific because these things are deliberate. Even this violence you're talking about is deliberate, so that it takes away. They're sort of like telling you that you're nothing more than somebody who is going to serve. Oh, you're so nice. I don't know how to take tea, but you know how to eat. I don't know how to take rice. Can you? I'm not helping you. Because there are certain things you have to be there. One of the things I always say, and please listen to me carefully, have the discipline not to act like the evil ones. If we go in being all nice and whatever so that they will see us as nice, they will keep, walking all over us. Violence has been used a lot of times. The first thing that is said, as a woman, the moment you are a female, you are a girl, you are seen as a victim. A lot of women have been killed just because they were pregnant with girls. And so you see, even before a girl child is born into this world, she's already discriminated against. And the easiest way that we can, approach this violence is having more women on the table. See what it took with having the Chief Justice and President of the Supreme Court in Kenya being a female. I tweeted, I said, this is judicial activism. A lot of people don't know that judicial too, the activism can also be there. So we need to have lots of more women in the table, because the system that is supposed to protect the women, they don't care. They are patriarchal in nature, and so what's their own? They just see us like, oh, what did they do ahead? They will tell you that, oh, it's done, everybody does it. For example, meetings, like in Nigerian politics, I don't know whether it's here, they will fix meeting 3 a.m., 4 a.m., where they know that you are disadvantaged as a female from going there, or as a married man. Why are you having meetings 4 a.m.? Are you okay? Meetings that we are supposed to have, what happened to 9 a.m.? What happened to 10 a.m.? You want me when you're sleeping, when you don't know what you, just so as to cut, the woman. It's just, first of all, we need to stand our ground. Before I quickly ask, I think you will be in a better position to talk about how to deal with this thing. Let me talk about the issue. There are certain things that we need to do differently. It's one thing to want to do something good. It's another thing to have the competence and the knowledge to be able to do it. And so as young women in the continent, not just young women, middle-aged women, all women, let's get that education that we want. The School of Politics, Policy, and Governance is, and I think, Antiobi, their admission is still on, right? So please, go in there and register. Because if you just say, oh, I want to do the good thing, and you get into office and you can't do the right thing, incompetence, there's nothing, it's very limiting. Before you know what's happening, you start behaving like the other people. Get the knowledge, start networking. Can we have shadow programs, you understand, where politicians who are already there, like, yeah, you're here, have someone who wants to run for office, shadow you, be with you, spend 3 months with you, learn more about it, be there, and ensure that, look, when we get in there, we'll do the right thing. Also within the advocacy world, let's not vilify people who have gotten into office, right? By the time you're okay, oh, you used to be an activist. Why are you now in politics? They are the same thing. Let's support those people. Because when we have this massive support, it limits. When people are isolated, it's much easier to go after them and, do all those things and perpetuate the violence against them. And then in the politics is that when one of us is touched, let us assume that all of us are touched. This thing about let us show them that all of us are crazy. Who wants to be sane? I'm not normal. I was in Dr. Obi's campaign. And this year, 2023, I was in the 2023 presidential campaign of Mr. Peter Obi. You look at me and they tell you, say, I'm not normal. Because in this world, I've been conditioned. In short, as a woman, I have, what did they call it? PTSD, right? Because of the way I've been brought up. So issue of being nice, issue of just normalizing things, accepting things, no, they must stop. We must all come around each other and be sure that we are there for each other and not allow the things that they tell us. It's not about what the society wants us to be, because they want us to behave in a certain way. Our grandmothers behaved in that way. Our mothers behaved in that way. And they want us to behave in that way too. No, it has to stop. And so we need to turn the table to say, Omo, I'm not even asking you to give me a seat at the table. I will bring my own table. And where I don't have table, I will bring a mat. We died here. We are not going anywhere.
Thank you so much. You touch one, you touch all. Politics of niceness must die. And thank you so much, because that segued into Nala actually going to introduce a program on fellowship. We can only pass on the knowledge. If we don't, it will die a natural death. So thank you very much, Aisha, for sharing that. Rana, after you, before I give my entire panelists last words, because we are running out of time, and unfortunately, we can't have the Q&A. But all of us are still here, so please get us on the side to actually engage us. Rana.
Yes, for sure. So I care a lot about this issue. I'm actually a survivor of a hate-based attack. Growing up in Queens, I was assaulted by a man who tried to take off my hijab. It was a anti-Muslim motivated attack. And the fun fact that most people don't know about me when they look at me, because I'm 5'1", is that I have a black belt in Shotokan karate. And I believe, yes, I will teach you how to fight. Like, I will literally teach you how to fight. I taught everybody in the council how to fight 2 days ago. So if you want to know how to fight, you could honestly come to me. So there's like 3 interventions that I'll talk about because I talk a lot about safety and think a lot about safety. The first thing is obviously changing this culture, right? Thinking about the normalization of violence. Like we talked about this over the past couple of days, this resiliency. We're expected that we'll take every single blow and then we'll bounce back up. But it's time that we do not allow that blow to keep happening, and it has to take a shift in culture for that to happen. And that includes online violence. Like, women experience online violence 27 times more likely than men do. And that is increasingly the reality for visible women. That silences women online. We know how important it is for women to be active online because that's a new third space that if not the first space, right, that we need to be active on. And the second thing that I would say is really this, like, actually, I wasn't joking. If you can take whatever martial arts class, MMA, Muay Thai, boxing, punch a bag in your house, like, I don't care what it is, but we're socialized so much to be kind, to be polite, to not be aggressive. But we have to unlearn that, and to unlearn that, you do that through your body. You actually learn the skills that you need, and these are survival skills, right? Our lives are literally at stake. At any moment, you travel, right? You're walking down the street, you're in your house, this violence can happen. And so it is a survival tool for women to learn how to de-escalate violence. If we want to teach women anything, like, this is what I'm teaching. Inshallah, when I have kids, like, my kid is 2 years old, my girl is 3 years old, she's gonna be in a martial arts class because I know the type of violence that she could be confronted with in this world that treats us like we're disposable, and we gotta change that. So that's the second thing I would say. And the third thing that I always say is, I never wanna have to teach a self-defense class again. So what are the systems that need to be changed? Not just the culture, but we heard about it earlier, right? The court system that might allow for this to happen, or the fact that our families might think that it's not that big of a deal, and so we don't want to talk about it, or it's stigmatized. What are the policies that could be put into place that really do, with money, with funding for survivors, protect survivors and create safety for people who experience violence, and then also disrupt the cycle of violence? We say hurt people, right? When you are someone who's gone through violence, when you grow up in a context of violence, oftentimes you perpetuate that violence, right? The violence becomes normalized throughout our cultures and societies. And so what is the healing mechanisms that we're putting in place? What are the community infrastructures? Who are your homies that you're gonna call up if something goes wrong, and they're gonna have your back, right? And they're gonna make you feel safe. And these are the types of things that we talk about in our work to make sure that we're existing in a world where we have one less act of violence committed against our communities.
Thank you so much, Rana.
Emma.
Yes, your final words,
Okay,
Aisha.
yeah, so let me quickly add out my final words. One is to say that I think there's hypocrisy in the world, and it needs to stop. We have a situation whereby we don't have a standard, as universally acceptable form of election. What is free, fair, credible election? We have situation whereby in certain parts of the world, it's okay for 300 people to be killed during election. And in another part of the world, nobody should be killed. That needs to stop. We need to have a universally accepted standard for election and violence, and there must be zero tolerance for violence. And the world must not accept anyone who gets into office or rig their way into office through violence or by rigging the election. And if we start from there, we begin to mitigate the violence that goes in with election. And my final thing that I'll talk about, there's a lot of online bullying. Trolls are out of the way. This is the thing. For me, anybody that knows my handle, it's crazy. If people want to follow me, I say, don't follow me if you don't have a stomach for ruffle, as we call it in Nigeria. Insults and compliments are the same. They are people's opinion about you. They are not your reality. If somebody says, Aya, you are beautiful, do you get angry? Why then will you get angry? Somebody says, Aya, you are ugly. It's the same thing. It's opinion. Because the first thing that needs to happen is that you need to take power away from that person, from the aggressor, from the person who is perpetrating. Because what they want to do is they want to make you angry. The only person that should make you angry should be you. And you should choose what you get angry over. Because the moment you do that, you take away power from them. And no matter what they say to you, you will not feel it. Because a lot of people, there are people who even refuse to have opinions because of what they will say to them online. And so when you take that power away from them, they can't do anything. And another thing also is to say, the person who is online, who is insulting you or whatever they say, you don't know them. But guess what? They know you. They will see you on the street and they will recognize who you are. But you will see them and you look straight through them and you will not know who they are. Why then do you get worked up about those people online? Because it's very, very important. Most times that online community has been used a lot because there are trolls farms that are brought on, to go after people. So what we must do is to take that power away from them. And at the end of the day, remember that there's only one you in this world. You are an endangered species. And so you must allow yourself to be heard in the world. Nobody must take your space away from you. You belong to this world. And don't allow anybody, wherever they come from, whoever they are, or however they think they own the space, to take that away from you. You are Nala. So go out there and be a queen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aisha. Wanja, your final word.
I know we are short for time, but I'm really encouraged. You talked that you are supporting Peter Obi. I was also supporting him. I just saw on Twitter everybody's calling themselves obedient. Yes. So I was unobedient, but we all know the outcome. I think as I just come to an end, I was speaking earlier when I was preparing to speak here. I spoke to one of my mentors, and probably just to inform everybody that I think the leadership journey is easier when you have people you are looking up to. You don't have to learn from your mistakes all the time. We don't have the time. We have things to do. So if there are people who have made mistakes before you, let's also learn from their mistakes so that we can make newer mistakes. 5 things, just to wrap up. My mentor tells me that there are 5 ways in which people get women out of politics and public space. Way 1, they make ridiculous of women. There's one of the woman politicians in Kenya. One day, she said, there's this proverb that says, what is good for the goose is good for the gander. But she made a mistake, and then she said, what is good for the gander? She just mixed up those words. Every time her clip plays on media, it is how she corrupted that idiom or proverb to say what is good for the gander is good for the goose is goose. So they just make her look like she doesn't know what she's talking about, and it happens to most women. The second thing that how people get women out of public space and public policy and politics is make women invisible. And I think because we have the power of the technology and the internet, we must make ourselves visible. And if I was in Nigeria, I would have said by force, by fire. And one of the ways is just tweeting. Like today when I sit down properly, the way I've participated in this, Nala, if you see me on Twitter saying I was in a global forum, don't worry, we're in Nairobi, but I'll make it look like. So anybody who doesn't know where I am, they would think I'm somewhere out of the country. So we have to make ourselves visible, document our achievements, document our things, because women do the donkey work, but men take the credit. Even by the time we are seated here, there was a lot of planning, there was a lot of making phone calls. Me, I was invited, I didn't see the email, there was follow-up. So take credit for your work and document your achievements. Third thing, double punishment. There is another politician in Kenya who slapped a woman. There was a politician, male governor, who slapped a woman MP. It was recorded on media and nothing happened to him. And then there was a deputy chief justice, if I'm not wrong. She allegedly pinched someone. It was not recorded anywhere, but she lost her job. So what am I saying? Women are double punishment, like 4 times, 5 times. So we ought to be cognizant of that, so that even when you're being punished, in as much as you acknowledge you might have made a mistake, you also stand for yourself, because women are punished severely. The fourth thing is burdening with guilt and shame. And I don't know where we got that from. Women are always saying sorry. Even when you are entering this door, you meet someone, oh, sorry. What are you sorry for, really? When someone tells you, oh, you're so smart, where did you get that jewelry? From Bronx or from Queens? You're like, oh, it was just in my cupboard. I was just there. We are always minimizing ourselves. And I think that is something we need to work on. And then also something else, how they get women out of leadership and public policy, is just withholding information. So we have to always be on top of things. If the landscape is not favorable, we have to educate yourself. You have to know that there is a formal communication and also the informal one where people speak under the table. You have to use it that way. But now if I sort of summarize my contribution from an intersectional perspective, I will say that when we talk about GBV, as it were, we also now have to talk about the online GBV, how it affects politicians. Mostly it's in terms of cartoons, and also allegedly that you are having affairs with men. So it happens all the time. They'll always get for you a boyfriend, a male. Some of them are quite ugly, I might say, but so now you don't know if you are angered because they have said that you have a relationship with them, or because they are not your type, but sorry. So we also have to be cognizant of those gender nuances where our contributions and our achievements are attributed to association with men. So like recently, there is a member of parliament who is against the finance bill. So we are in the whole government financial year, what. So I was listening to her, and the discussions are, you have been paid by male politicians to sabotage the finance bill, as if to say her contributions can only be influenced by men. But just last but not least, now that we are with people who are donors, people who have budgets, it's important that we ask ourselves the questions we were asked in the morning, who's not in the room. I think there is significantly low representation of young women with disabilities in these NGO spaces, in these forums and places. There's a need for intergenerational dialogues. And I'll just finish it with the judiciary representatives. Our parliament is at 24%, 23.4. The law talks about 34%. What are you doing about it? Because we have to get to that. A proverb says that hands wash each other. So we have to learn from each other. We have to work together. And for the holders of budgets and the holders of power, let's co-create programs for young women with young women. Because sometimes you just make programs that are not responsive to the needs of young women. Get them talking. If you're coming to the young politicians, for example, even as you say that you are going to get me a woman parliamentarian who is a mentor, I'll tell you to talk to my Secretary General first, because he's the holder of power or the director of elections. So let's co-create. Let us push for political hygiene in our community. Let's call out the patriarchy. And I am Nala because the future and the present is female. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wanja. Rana, 30 seconds.
Yeah, I'll be really quick. I just want to say that, it's really important for us to build in solidarity globally. As someone coming from Queens, as someone in the diaspora, as a child of immigrants, I want to come home. Like, I wish my family didn't have to immigrate, right? I wish African people didn't have to leave the continent, didn't have to risk their lives every single day trying to find safety and security. And I believe that, we're watching the work that's happening on this continent. We want to be part of the work that's happening on this continent. The systems we're up against are global. Our movements must be global in order for us to be able to do the work effectively and have all of us in safety and security.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd just like to end off with a quote I said earlier this year when I did a TED, that in respect of us as young women rising in politics, our continent and governments clean up, we must. Only we know how, and only we can. Let us do it. Let us not limit ourselves. We are Nala because politics is a place for young women. Thank you very much. Thank you to my panelists. Thank you so much for your conversation. I hand over to you, Edith.